let's talk about Lesson 7, Activity 3, Question 8. We're asked to complete a proof, and we're given that line AB is congruent to KL, line AC is congruent to line KM, angle A is congruent to angle K, angle C is congruent to angle M. Triangle KLM is the image of triangle ABC following a reflection, and we're asked to prove that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle KLM. Alright, so there's a lot of information being thrown at us here, so let's get organized before we get started. And of course you'll notice that in your workbook they've actually already filled in most of the steps, but I thought it might be beneficial for us to start from the beginning and really construct this proof all the way through. So that being said, let's get started. Now, let's consider the information that we've been given and make sure we understand it. So let's start off up here. We are given that line AB is congruent to KL. Line AB, which is over here, is congruent to KL. Now, if you need a refresher on what it means for things to be congruent, please pause the video, reference the definition, and come back. This is something I've already explored in some detail in previous videos. Now, next we're told that line AC is congruent to KM, so AC is congruent to KM. And as you can see, I'm kind of marking my picture here with lines to help me organize and keep track of this information. So when I draw a single tick mark on AB and a single tick mark on LK, it just helps me remember, okay, these are the two segments that are congruent. I'm pairing them together. Same thing with AC and KM. You can see I've drawn two tick marks on each of those. Again, that's just my way of signaling to my brain that those two line segments are congruent. So next, we're also told, let's see, that angle A, which is over here, is congruent to angle K, over here. Angle C, right here, and I'll give this one kind of a double angle, is congruent to angle M. And I also know that triangle KLM is the image of triangle ABC following a reflection. So this is important, and let's make sure we understand what this means. So triangle KLM, pretty self-explanatory, we see the triangle, is the image of triangle ABC following a reflection. So if this is the image of triangle ABC following a reflection, it kind of means that's the result of the reflection. And you can all see here, if I draw this dotted line, this might be our line of symmetry. Imagine if I crease my paper here and folded it in half. You can see that ABC would leave an imprint in the shape of KLM, and that's what we mean by it's a reflection. So, again, KLM is the image or the result of ABC, triangle ABC, being reflected across a line of symmetry. And given all this information, we're asked to prove that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle KLM. So, let's get started. And the first thing we start with is always just to kind of rewrite our given information. Now, for the sake of time, I'm not going to rewrite all these statements, but what you would do is you would take all of this given information and write it as your first statement, and for the reason you can just say, well, this was given. I don't really need to provide any explanation beyond that. This was given information. And the next thing that I like to do is say to myself, okay, how will I know when I'm done with this proof? And that will be when I can claim that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle KLM. And I'm trying to figure out kind of a roadmap to make my way there. So it's hard to get to your destination if you don't really know where it is, right? So something else to consider. What does it mean for two triangles to be congruent to one another? Well, we know that triangle congruence comes from us being able to say that all three sides of the triangles are congruent to one another, or in other words, each triangle has a line segment that is congruent to a corresponding line segment in the other triangle. And we've already got two of those established, right? I already know AB and KL are congruent. I already know that lines AC and KM are congruent. So, to complete this definition of triangle congruence, it looks like I'm going to have to figure out a way to prove that BC and LM are congruent. I also have to prove that all three angles are congruent. You can see they've already given us two of the three, so I already know that AC corresponds to KL, that they are congruent, or excuse me, angle A to angle K. I know that angle C is congruent to angle M. So I'm going to have to find a way to prove that angle B is congruent to angle L. So again, once I can establish that all three angles, there's congruence, and that there's congruence between the three line segments in each triangle, I can claim that these two triangles are congruent. So, again, most of this work is done for me. I've got kind of 2/3 of it done. So where do I go from here? Well, let's consider our line segments first. So I'm going to work on figuring out how to prove that line segment BC is congruent to line segment LM. Now, I can't just claim that right off the bat, but I do know something about their measure. I do know something about their measure, and I'm going to claim that BC, that length, the length of BC is equal to the length of LM, or in other words, they have equal measure. And the reason that I can claim this, or state this, is because a reflection is an isometry. A reflection is an isometry, and what that means is isometries preserve distance. So any relationship, any distance relationship between 2 points in triangle ABC has been preserved in its image, the triangle KLM. So if this point B and this point C had a certain distance between them in the original, in the pre-image, then their new corresponding points L and M have preserved that distance because, again, a reflection is an isometry. And it's important, again, that we've established already in our statements that this was a reflection, that KLM is an image of ABC following a reflection. Okay, so I've said that BC is equal to LM because a reflection is an isometry, and isometries preserve distance. Now, from here, I can kind of piggyback off of this and now say, okay, well, line segment BC is congruent to line segment LM. And I'm able to say this because if two segments have equal measures, then they are congruent. And you can see I'm kind of writing this shorthand. This is just to save time and space. When you do this on your own, please write full sentences, full explanations for everything. Okay. So again, because of the reflections being isometries, I was able to say that BC is equal to LM, and because they have equal measure, I'm able to claim that these two segments are congruent. So I have just established one of the remaining pieces that I needed to complete that definition of triangle congruence. So I now have established that each of the line segments has a corresponding congruent line segment in the other triangle. Now I'm going to work on angles. So I already have A and K being congruent, angles C and M being congruent. I'm going to work on angles B and L. Now, similarly to what I did with line segments, I'm going to say that the measure of angle B is equal to the measure of angle L. And once again, I'm calling on my knowledge of this being a reflection. And I can say this because a reflection is a rigid transformation, and rigid transformation preserve angle measures. So again, a reflection is rigid. It's a rigid transformation, and rigid transformations preserve angle measures. So whatever measure angle B had originally, its counterpart, angle L, has preserved in this image, in this triangle KLM. Okay, so if they have you guessed it, they have equal measure, then they must be congruent. So I can now claim that angle B is congruent to angle L, because if two angles have equal measures, then they are congruent. Okay. So I have now established not only that each of the line segments has a corresponding congruent line segment in the image in that triangle, but now I've also shown that all three angles have their own corresponding and congruent angle in the other triangle. So I can now say, it turns out I had an extra row, so I don't need anything here. I can now say that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle KLM because of the definition of congruence. Specifically, we're talking about congruence of triangles, but it's the definition of congruence. Now, I know that when watching someone do a proof or when reading them through textbook pages, it almost looks too easy because everything is kind of already perfectly mapped out. When you do this, remember that it's going to be some trial and error. Again, I always recommend starting with what you've been given and then think about where you're trying to end up and how you can kind of leverage your way there. Doing these is kind of like doing a maze, right? So in a maze, you get to the end eventually, but you might make some wrong turns here and there, so there might be some scratch work and some rearranging and redoing involved. So it's a matter of practice. Stick with it, and I hope that this video has helped you understand this proof. See you next time.